Welcome back everyone, this is Sergio Betts, and today we're taking a full look at the UCLA women's basketball season, not just through wins and losses, but through the journey of the players who shaped the year. Every season starts with expectations, but expectations don't win games, preparation does. And from the first practices of the year, UCLA looked like a team determined to grow beyond what people expected. The early part of the season is always about chemistry. Players return from off-season training, new teammates join rotations, and coaches begin shaping lineups that can survive long conference schedules. UCLA's strength early wasn't just talent, it was discipline. Defensive effort showed before offensive rhythm fully developed, and teams that defend early usually build strong foundations. In November games, UCLA didn't always play perfect basketball, no team does, but you could see patterns forming, ball movement improve week by week, defensive communication sharpened, transition offense started clicking, and slowly, confidence grew across the roster. Fans often look only at final scores, but coaches look at habits. Are players rotating correctly? Are they closing out shooters? Are they recovering after mistakes? En early season UCLA show improvement en los detalles. What also stood out was paciencia. Teams sempre rusher li success, trying to pick too soon. UCLA instead focused on progression. Coaches allowed rotations to evolve, players learned roles, and the group began understanding how to win games together, rather than relying on individual performances. By December, identity began to show. UCLA wasn't just talent, they were structura. Offensive possessions slow when necesario. Defensive pressure increase a key momentos. Rebando mata les improve. Y games began tilting en UCLA's favor through execution rather than luck. And that's when confidence becomes visible, not just for players, but for fans too. Poly-pavilion crowds began expecting wins, not hoping for them. Energy shifted. And once expectation becomes standard, teams begin playing differently. But seasons never stay smooth for long. Conference play always tests depth and mental toughness. And that's where UCLA's journey truly began. UCLA Women's Basketball 2026 Season Story Part 2. Conference Play, Pressure and Growth. As conference play began, the season shifted into a different gear. Non-conference games build confidence, but conference games test resilience. Oponentes no hay tendencias. Coaches study film muy intense. Familiar rivales entendan toda attack weaknesses. Y estos es donde UCLA started learning how to win difficult games. Travel began stacking en tosquejoles. Road games mean early departures, unfamiliar gyms, and crowds that want to see visiting teams struggle. Players juggle academics and recovery while still being expected to perform. Some games this season weren't clean victories. There were stretches where shots didn't fall, defensive rotations slipped, or momentum swung toward opponents. But what mattered most was how UCLA responded. You could see maturity developing in moments when games tightened. Instead of panicking, players slowed possessions. Communication improved. Veterans guided younger teammates through tough stretches. And slowly, wins started coming from execution rather than just talent. Betts' presence inside became even more influential during conference play. Opponents tried different defensive strategies, sending double teams or forcing outside shots. But UCLA adapted. Ball movement improved. Perimeter players gained confidence. And spacing allowed offense to function even when defenses collapsed inside. Meanwhile, guards like Kiki Rice managed tempo under pressure. Late-game possessions matter more in conference matchups, and Ruiz repeatedly showed composure when games demanded precision. And it wasn't just the stars contributing. Depth became UCLA's advantage. Bench players stepped in during foul trouble or injury stretches and maintained energy levels. Conference seasons exposed teams without depth, and UCLA showed they could survive long stretches without losing identity. Defensively, rotations sharpened. Coaches emphasized closing defensive possessions through rebounding, and improvements showed. Opponents found fewer second chances as the season progressed. But conference play also brings adversity. Every team experiences losses or near losses. Those moments test belief. Teams either fracture or tighten unity. For UCLA, adversity seemed to strengthen trust. Post-game interviews revealed accountability rather than blame. Players talked about improvement, not excuses. That mindset matters when seasons approach critical months. And as January turned into February, UCLA no longer looked like a team finding itself. They looked like a team preparing for something bigger, because February basketball always signals what March will demand. Part 3. Player Development y Season Turning Points. As the season moved diempre entre febrero, individual growth across a roster began showing in real time. Teams that made tournament runs are rarely the same teams that opened the season months earlier. Conference develops, roles become clearer, and players begin understanding how they can impact games consistently. Lauren Betts' evolution throughout the season stood out not only because of her scoring and defensive presence, but because of her decision-making. Early in the year, opponents focused on crowding the paint whenever she touched the ball. But as weeks passed, Betts improved at reading those situations. When double teams arrived, she found open teammates. When defenders hesitated, she attacked quickly. And defensively, her rim protection forced opponents to rethink drives before attempting them. Kiki Rice's growth showed differently. Her leadership became more visible. When games slowed or opponents made runs, Rice stabilized possessions. She understood when to push pace and when to settle offense. That's carry pressure in tournament basketball, and her ability to remain composed added consistency to UCLA's late-game execution. Gabriela Jaques continued filling versatile roles. Some nights required scoring contributions, others required defensive matchups or rebounding effort. Players who embrace versatility become essential in postseason play, where matchups change quickly. Gianna can eat Kansas shooting open games in critical moments. When defenses collapse toward interior threats, perimeter scoring punished defensive adjustments. Confidencia from outside stretches defenses and creates space, and Kip Kansas' presence changed spacing dynamics. Charlize Leger-Walker's experience influenced team composure. Veterans understand how to navigate emotional swings during long seasons. Her steady contributions helped maintain focus when games became unpredictable. Angela Dodalich's physicality also proved valuable in tight matchups. Tournament games often become battles of rebounding and positioning, and players willing to do difficult work away from headlines become crucial. Sienna Betts and Lena Bilic added depth contributions that kept rotations balanced. Fresh legs and dependable minutes allowed teams to maintain intensity across 4 games. But development stories aren't just individual. Teams evolve collectively. Turning points appear in games where UCLA fought back from deficits or held leads under pressure. Those moments define confidence. Players begin trusting that adversity can be overcome rather than feared. By late February, UCLA looked more cohesive than earlier in the year. Defensive communication improved, offensive movement felt more natural, and players understood where teammates would be during possessions. Y as March approachó, conversaciones shifted. Porque regular season wins build standings, but March defines legacies. Part 4. March Madness Pressure and Tournament Mentality. When March arrives, everything changes. Regular season rhythms disappear, and every game suddenly carries season-ending consequences. The margin for error shrinks. Teams don't have time to correct mistakes over multiple games. One bad night can end months of preparation. And that pressure transforms how games feel. Possessions slow, coaches shorten rotations, defensive mistakes become costly. Players feel urgency en every decision. Tournament basketball rewards discipline, preparación y emociona control more than raw talent. For UCLA, preparación to a decisión posición de muel for ese environment. Depth allowed flexibility. Defensive structure limited opponent scoring runs, and offensive patience created better scoring opportunities late in games. Tournament opponents present new challenges. Teams son familiar durante la regular season. Súdame a pier con unique styles. Some play fast, otros lo tempo. Some rely heavily on outside shooting, while otros attack inside. Quick ajustancias ve como crítico. And players experience emotional weight differently. Seniors understand each game could be their final college performance. Younger players experience tournament intensity for the first time. Coaches must balance emotion with focus. Históricamente, tournament success often depends on unexpected contribuciones. A role player hits key shots. A defender makes game-changing stops. A bench player provides energy during critical moments. Andy Novify. Andy Farro. Puceleas depth decision. Creado oportunidades for diferentes placeres to step forward when needed. Another challenge en marcha es fatigo. Travel increases, media tension grows. Recovery time shrinks between games. Teams must manage energy while maintaining competitive intensity. And this is where culture matters most. Teams that trust each other respond better to adversity. UCLA's season-long emphasis on accountability y teamwork posicionan entrando el tournament stress more effectively. Marcha, algo creas unforgettable moments. Comebacks, buzzer beaters, and breakthrough performances become part of program history. Fans remember these games long after seasons end. But regardless of results, tournaments provide reflection opportunities. Coaches analice growth, players evalúa developmento, y programas prepare for future seasons. Y a su se le ha navegado March, conversaciones shift from expectations to legacy building. Because each season adds chapters to programa identidad. One part of the season fans rarely see is how exhausting travel becomes over time. Games appear as single events on schedules, but for athletes, travel stretches across weeks and months. Early mornings, most rides to airports, long flights, hotel check-ins, practice sessions in unfamiliar gyms, and then game preparation, all tacked together. For UCLA players, many road trips start in Westwood, packing gear after classes or practices, heading through Los Angeles traffic toward the airport, and preparing mentally for competition before even boarding flights. Once teams land, routines shift again. New courts, different lighting, unfamiliar rims, and opponents energizados by home crowds. Fatigue builds slowly. Flights disrupt sleep schedules. Recovery time shrinks between games. And yet, athletes still attend the classes remotely, complete assignments, and maintain academic responsibilities while competing. Travel also tests discipline. Nutrition, sleep, y recovery habits become essential. Athletes que mantienen rutinas que forman ver late in seasons o en otros tire. Another unseen challenge es emocional fatiga. Being away from campus, friends, y familia repetible can wear down players mentally. Coaches and teammates become support systems on the road. Team chemistry strengthens during long trips because players rely on each other. And yet, travel also builds memories. Teams bond through shared experiences, team meals, bus rides, and conversations away from competition. Those moments create unity that shows up later in tight games. By tournament time, players who handle travel discipline well often maintain sharper focus. And UCLA's ability to maintain performance across travel-heavy stretches reflected preparation beyond just basketball skills. Behind every televised game sits a week of unseen effort, and understanding those realities adds appreciation for what athletes accomplish on the court. Part 6. Media coverage, spotlight pressure, and growing visibility. As UCLA's success grew this season, so did attention around the program. Media coverage plays a bigger role than many fans realize. Teams de buen consistente attract cámaras, intermuses, análisis segmentes, y online discusiones de add new layers of pressure. Early in the season, games might pass quietly outside local circles. But as wins stack up and rankings improve, national conversations begin. Suddenly players are answering more interview questions. Highlights circulate online, and expectations increase with every broadcast. For athletes, handling media attention becomes another skill to learn. Interviews happen before y after games. Sometimes after tough losses, when emociones are still raw. Players must learn how to representarse themselves y dar programa, profesionalmente, while manejando desacuento por excitamente. Coaches also manejar narrativos carefully. Media often focuses on star players, but coaches emphasize team effort and preparation. Maintaining internal focus while outside conversations grow louder becomes essential. Social media adds another dimension. Highlights spread quickly, but so do criticisms. Athletes see praise one day and negative commentary the next. mental resilience becomes part of modern competition. For UCLA women's basketball, increased attention reflects growth in the women's game overall. More fans are watching, more analysts are covering games, and more networks are investing in broadcasts. Tap visibilidad beneficia programas y players alike. But atención also raises expectaciones. Teams once considered underdogs suben de coma targets. Opponents prepare more intensity. Every game becomes an opportunity for another team to make a statement. UCLA responded well to that shift this season. Players maintained focus on internal goals, rather than external noise. Interviews reflected team-first mentality, and performances remained disciplined. Visibility also benefits future recruiting. Young players watching successful programs imagine themselves in those jerseys. Media exposición alepes programas atract talent de sus temas competitives, y as cobres gros so de responsabilidad fue storytellers documentando los programas. Análisis más go beyond the highlights y explora the work beyond success. Because attention may spotlight games, but preparation defines outcomes. Part 7. Player impact and roster contributions. As the season progressed, one thing became clear. UCLA's success wasn't built around a single play. It was built around contributions from across the roster, with different players stepping forward at different moments. Norton Betts remained the anchor inside. Her presence altered the women's game plans before tip-off even happened. Teams prepara específicamente to limitar touches o crowd de paint, pero tras decisión se ha adustado. Funden timates, un double team, y finish ineficiente, y gente necesitada. Defensively, her rim protection discouraged drives and forced opponents into tougher shots. Kiki Rice's influence often appeared in moments fans don't always notice immediately. She controlled tempo, made smart decisions late in games, and kept offensive possessions organized under pressure. Leadership from the guard position becomes critical during tight matchups, and Rice repeatedly delivered calm decision-making when games slowed down. Gabriela Jaques, provided versatile, contributiva en multiple roles dependiente matchups. Some games demanded scoring, others required defensive intensity or rebounding effort. Players who embrace flexible roles help teams adapt during unpredictable tournament play. Jana Klitkensen's shooting created spacing that opened opportunities across the offense. When her shots fell, defenses had to stretch outward, allowing interior players more room to operate. Confidencias from perimeter scores, tiendes como defensas approachagames. Sarlise Leger Walker brought a veteran experiencia, que el pensabilizar team energía en difficult stretches. Players with experience understand emotional swings across seasons, and often guide younger teammates through pressure moments. Angela Dugalic added physicality and effort in areas often unnoticed in stat sheets. Rebounding battles, screens, and defensive positioning matter deeply in tournament basketball, and her contributions helped UCLA control possession battles. Sergio Betts provided depth and valuable minutes, keeping energy levels consistent when rotation shifted. Depth becomes critical late in seasons when fatigue accumulates. Lena Bilic contribuye versatilidad, stepping into roles needed durante diferentes matchups. Teams relying on múltiples contribuidores, rather than single stars, often sustain success longer in possession play. And across the roster, growth appeared collectively. Players trusted each other more as the season progressed. Offensive movement improved. Defensive communication strengthened. Rotations became smoother. But late season, UCLA's identity wasn't just talent, it was cohesion. And cohesion matters most when games become unpredictable. Part 8. Season Reflection y Lessons Learned. As the season comes into focus, in hindsight, reflection becomes important. Every season carries lessons, not just outcomes. Wins bring confidence, losses bring adjustments, and growth often happens quietly between games rather than during them. Looking back, UCLA's journey this year showed progression more than perfection. Early season games revealed areas needing improvement, and rather than panicking, the team steadily corrected mistakes. Defensive positioning improved, offensive spacing became more consistent, communication sharpened across the roster. Another lesson this season emphasized was patience. Teams rarely peak in November. Success arrives when improvement continues month after month. UCLA showed discipline in trusting the process, rather than chasing early season headlines. Adversity also shaped the season. No team moves through conference play without difficult nights. What matters is response. UCLA consistently responded with accountability, adjusting strategies and improving execution, rather than dwelling on setbacks. Leadership development also stood out. Players grew more vocal. Teammates support each other visibly. Y accountabilidad strengthened. Leadership doesn't always come from the loudest voices. Sometimes it appears through consistent effort and calm presence. Fans also experienced growth alongside the program. Fully pavilion crowds showed increasing engagement. Support strengthened as expectations rose. Community connection around the program deepened throughout the season. And reflection isn't just about performance. It's about appreciation, recognizing the work behind games, the effort behind improvement, and the commitment required to compete at this level. Every season closes one chapter while preparing the next. And UCLA's chapter this year shows a program continuing to rise. Part 9. Future Trajectory and What Can Remain Bajo. Asimismo vayan atención naturalmente. Con els programes constante evolve, UCLA Women's Basketball entres de coming years con strong momento. One reason optimism exists is player development. Younger players gain valuable experience this season, preparing them for larger responsibilities moving forward. Experience under pressure builds confidence, and those lessons carry into future seasons. Recruiting also shapes trajectories. Programs that maintain national competitiveness attract talented players who want to compete at high levels. UCLA's recent success and national visibility strengthen its recruiting position, ensuring continued roster depth. Coaching stability matters too. Systems, culture, and expectations remain consistent when leadership stays aligned. Players entering the program understand what standards they must meet. Development pathways remain clear. Another factor shaping UCLA's future is conference competition. As college athletics shifts and travel demands evolve, programs must adapt strategically. UCLA's ability to maintain competitive consistency despite changes demonstrates institutional strength. Looking ahead, expectations for UCLA shift from hoping to compete to expecting postseason success. That mental shift changes preparation. Teams prepare not merely to participate, but to advance. Future seasons will bring new challenges. Player graduaciones, crear leadership reps. Nuevo atletismo se adapta programa cultura. Opponente studia UCLA more closely, looking for ways to counter strengths. Pero programas de énfasis development en cultura ofrecen overcome transiciones excesamente. Fans suelen expectar continuar growth en la women's game nacional. Increased media coverage, attendance, and investment elevate competition across programs. UCLA's position within that growth offers opportunity to remain among national contenders. Y as futuras seasons unfold, nuevas stories will emerge, new leaders, breakout players, y una formada de momentos. Porque college basketball no está static, y celes las jorne continuos fuego. And as we reach the end of this season's story, it's worth stepping back and appreciating the full journey. Seasons are rarely remembered through moments, things that shifted momentum. Players stepping forward unexpectedly, crowds rising in big moments, teammates supporting each other through difficult stretches. For UCLA women's basketball, this season added another chapter to a growing program identity. It showed resilience, growth, and competitive maturity. Gains mattered, but so did development. Improvement from November to March tells a bigger story than any single result. Fans experienced the journey too. Game nights at Poly Pavilion created shared memories. Road wins sparked conversations across campus and online. Discussions about rankings, matchups, and tournament chances brought communities together. And for players, this season represents countless unseen hours, workouts before sunrise, late-night film sessions, Academic responsibilities balanced with practice. Recovery routines followed daily. And sacrifices made to pursue success. Basketball seasons end, but lessons continue. Players grow as athletes and individuals. Programs evaluate and prepare for what comes next. Coaches refine strategies. New athletes prepare to join teams. Es ansia de pasado para las contravísimas caminas de soportar la programa. This podcast season aimed to tell the stories beyond highlights, explorando travel life, media attention, athlete development, fan cultura, y the realidades helping modern college athletics. Because understanding the game means understanding everything surrounding it. And as this chapter closes, excitement builds for what lies ahead. New players will rise. New challenges will appear. New memories will form. That's what makes college sports special. Constant renewal. Constant growth. So as we wrap up this extended season reflection, thank you to everyone who followed along, listened, and supported the conversations throughout the year. The story doesn't end here. It pauses briefly before the next chapter begins. This is Sergio Betts, and the podcast will return March 22nd for Season 3. Let's take some questions that listeners often ask when we talk about NAL and athlete branding. One common question is, do all college athletes actually make money through NAL? The honest answer is no. Only a small percentage receive major deals. Most NAL oportunidades a solo participaciones o loco colaboraciones. Success usually dependent on visibilidad, personal, consistencia, and how athletes build relaciones con fans y brandes. Another question listeners ask is, does NIL distract players from basketball? For some athletes, managing opportunities can be challenging, but many programs now help players balance responsibilities. And players who manage NIL well often develop time management and professional skills, useful beyond sports. A third question comes up often. What happens to athletes who don't go professional? Most athletes move into careers outside basketball. Many enter coaching, broadcasting, training, business, or completely different fields. College prepares them academically and socially for life beyond sports. Another listener question. Are UCLA athletes positioned better because of Los Angeles exposure? Being in LA helps because brands and media opportunities exist nearby, but opportunity still requires effort. Visibility alone doesn't guarantee deals. And finally, listeners ask, how early should athletes think about life after basketball? The best answer is, as early as possible. Careers end quickly, so building skills outside basketball while still playing creates smoother transitions later. Now that's it questions listeners ask about tournament basketball and UCLA's season. A common question is, why does tournament basketball feel so different from regular season games? Because every game can end the season. Pressure rises. Teams shorten rotations. Possessions matter more. Mental toughness becomes critical. Another question listeners ask, what usually determines tournament success? Defense, composure, y adaptabilidad. Teams that handle adversidad calme often sorbire de perrant. Another distera question. Do experiencia players matter more in marcha? Yes. Veterans who've played in tournament settings help teams stay calm. Experiencia helps decision making in high pressure momentos. Another frequent question. What surprised you most about UCLA this season? The team's depth and growth. Different players stepped up throughout the year, showing development across the roster. And the final common question, what does UCLA need to improve for future tournament success? Consistencia en ejecución, manteniendo defensiva intensidad y continuando player development across el rostro. Las combine cuestiones listores might ask after hearing both NAL discusiones y tournamento reflexiones. One question listeners ask is, does NIL change how players perform in March? In some cases, visibility increases pressure, but strong programs help players stay focused on performance first. Another listener question. Can branding opportunities actually help athletes mentally prepare for life after college? Yes, because managing partnerships builds professional skills athletes use after sports careers end. Listeners also ask, do tournament performances affect professional oportunidades? Absolute. March performances often increase exposure de scouts y overseas oportunidades. Another combined question: how do athletes balance branding, school, and tournament preparation? Through structured scheduling and support systems from coaching staff and academic advisors. Combined Q&A session, episodes 3 and 4. Themes Together Session B. Here's another round of listener questions, combining both topics. One frequent question: will NIL change college basketball long-term? Yes. Athletes now have more control over their opportunities, and programs must adapt. Another listener question: does March Madness still matter most despite NIL opportunities? Yes. Performance on the court remains the biggest driver of recognition and opportunity. Another common question: what should fans understand about athletes during tournament time? The players balance enormos prese, quan still viendo estudiantes y young adultas. Y finalmente, what's next for UCLA women's basketball after este season? Continue growth, recruiting development, y building toro sostiene la final competitiveness. Disco en e-blogs ad 30-20 minutes combine rontane, one red naturale. Next, we can generate listener mailbag stories, simulated interviews, or game breakdown segments to extend runtime further if needed. But yes, generate mailbag stories. Here are mailbag listener story segments you can use in the podcast. These are written as if listener submit stories o experiencias relativo de episodios 3 en 4 temas. Nil, studentatre ligo, turnamen presia, y musea la cultura. De ad natura runtam, y make el podcast feel community driven. You can drop these segments anywhere in the episode. Listener mailbag segment 1. Student life and UCLA reality. Let's move into our listener mailbag, because a lot of you sent messages after our last episode about student life around UCLA. One message comes from Daniel, a second-year student living off campus near Westwood. Daniel writes that people outside LA often don't understand how expensive student life becomes here. He mentioned working late shifts at a restaurant after class, then waking up early for lectures, just to cover rent and groceries. And even then, he says, attending games sometimes feels like a luxury rather than a normal student activity. Daniel also said something interesting. He feels proud supporting UCLA teams because watching games reminds him why he chose this university in the first place. Even when money is tight, showing up for games gives him energy to keep going. And that reflects something many students experience. Sports become part of motivation, not just entertainment. Listener mailbag segment 2. Athlete perspective. Another message quema al asociar. Sobre estos, que los coches de las últimas calles son más abandonadas, apoyan por más caracteres del tráfico. They describe going from packed schedules filled with practices and team meetings, to suddenly having empty evenings after graduation. They said losing that routine felt harder than expected. Que also menciona a NLL discusión estolar. Maken tinkaba co diferentes metaben, if das oportunidades existe cuando cabaneles. No necessarily financiale, pero en términos de building conexiones y crear oportunidades earlier. Der advice de 43 listing. Start planning early for life and sports. Listener mailbag segment 3. March Madness Fun Experience. Here's one from Jessica, who grew up in Southern California and said her favorite memories involve watching March Madness games with family. She wrote that even when UCLA wasn't playing, tournament games brought everyone together. But when UCLA does play, the atmosphere changes completely. She described living through every possession, every run, every defensive stop, like it personally affected her mood for the rest of the day. And that emotional connection is why tournament basketball matters. Fans ton justo, de experiencias games. Listener mailbag segment forte. NELL y branding questions. Another listener, Marcus, siente cuestión mixto con story. He works in marketing and follows college sports closely. Marcus mentions seeing athletes build personal brands now, and he appreciates when athletes show personality and authenticity rather than just highlights. He said fans connect more with players who show real moments, struggles, recovery, preparation, not just game-winning shots. His point was that NAL opportunities feel more meaningful when fans understand athletes as people, not just performers. Listener mailbag, segment 5. Westwood game night experience. And finally, a message from Alana, a UCLA alum who moved away after graduation but still follows games closely. She said her favorite memories involved walking through Westwood village before games, seeing fans in blue and gold, grabbing food with friends, then heading to Pauli Pavilion together. She described it as a feeling de comunidad que she misses más, living in another city. Historias like that remind us why college sports connect people long after graduation. These mailbag stories are frequently 30 minutos van spoken natural. Next, we can generate simulated player interview segments, coach reflection segments, fan debate segments, game breakdown deep dives, future season predictions. Just tell me what segment you want next. Don't use Daniel, use a student from Spain. Usual a common use name in Spain. Here is the corrected mailbag. Segment 1. Replacing Daniel with a common Spanish student name and keeping the segment natural for podcast flow. Listener mailbag segment 1. Student life and UCLA reality. Let's move into our listener mailbag, because a lot of you sent messages after our last episode about student life around UCLA. One message comes from Javier, a student from Spain, currently studying near Westwood. Javier shared that people outside Los Angeles often don't fully understand how expensive student life becomes here. He talked about working part-time after classes and balancing assignments just to manage rent and daily expenses. He explained that sometimes attending games or going out with friends feels like something he has to budget carefully, rather than just enjoying freely. But he also said that going to Pauli Pavilion and supporting UCLA teams reminds him why he chose to study here in the first place. He said being around that energy gives him motivation when school and financial pressures start feeling overwhelming. And that message reflects something many international and out-of-state students experience. Sports become part of their connection to campus life, not just entertainment. If you want, next we can also add mailbag stories from international fans or student athletes, since UCLA has a large international student presence. Add a female and man listener mailbag segment. 1. Student life and UCLA reality. Let's move into our listener mailbag, because a lot of you sent messages after our last episode about student life around UCLA. One message comes from Javier, a student from Spain, currently studying near Westwood. Javier shared that people outside Los Angeles often don't fully understand how expensive student life becomes here. He talked about working part-time after classes and balancing assignments just to manage rent and daily expenses. He explained that sometimes attending games or going out with friends feels like something he has to budget carefully, rather than something he can do freely. But he also said, going to Pauli Pavilion and supporting su UCLA teams reminds him why he chose to study there in the first place. Being around that energía gives him motivación when school y financial pressure start feeling overwhelming. We also received a message from Lucia, another student from Spain studying at UCLA. Lucia talked about how different campus life feels compared to home, especially in terms of cost of living and independence. She mentioned learning quickly how to balance groceries, transportation, schoolwork, and social life all at once. But she also said that attending UCLA games helped her feel connected to campus faster. Sí, students y fans cometer a games me der feel parte del comunidad, even while ajustando la life en another contra. And stories like Javier's and Lucicia's son te importante. For many students, especially international ones, sports become parte de cómo de feel conectado to UCLA beyond just classes. Now, Gian, let's move to our listener mailbag, because a lot of you sent messages after our last episode about student life around UCLA. One message comes from Javier, a student from Spain currently studying near Westwood. Javier said that people outside Los Angeles often don't fully understand how expensive student life becomes here. He talked about working part-time after classes and balancing assignments just to manage rent and daily expenses. He explained that sometimes attending games or going out with friends feels like something he has to budget carefully, rather than something he can do freely. But he also said, going to Pauli Pavilion y supporting su UCLA teams reminds him why he chose to study here in the first place. Being around that energía gives him motivation when el suelo y financial pressure start feeling overwhelming. We also received a message from Lucia, another student from España estudiando a UCLA. Lucía tocaba al campus de lo que mantaba merado con su vía, y Lucía tocaba en la cabeza del priso, cartas o de exio. de la producción de Comba Porrati, así en términos de cost of living e independencia. She mentioned learning quickly how to balance groceries, transportation, schoolwork, and social life, all at once. But she also said that attending UCLA games helped her feel connected to campus faster. Seeing students and fans come together at games made her feel part of the community, even while adjusting to life in another country. In stories like Javier's and Lucicia's, show something important. For many students, especially international ones, sports become parte de que fuera conectado UCLA beyond whose classes. Listener mailbag segment. Driving in Los Angeles and transportation reality near UCLA. Let's continue with another listener message that connects to daily life around UCLA, and something almost everyone living in Los Angeles experiences, driving. This message comes from Alejandro, a student living a little outside Westwood, who commutes to campus. He shared that one thing many students don't expect before arriving in LA is how much time is spent driving. Even short distances can take much longer during peak traffic hours. Students commuting from areas like Culver City, Santa Monica, or the Valley often plan their days around traffic patterns. A trip that looks short on a map can become a long commute, depending on the tempo day. Alejandro also mentioned que driving expenses add up quickly. Gas prices in California tend to be among the highest in the country, y beyond the fuel, drivers pay for insurance, maintenance, y parking. Some discussiones en California have also incluido la posibilidad of mileage-based road usage fees in the future, essentially charging drivers based on how much they drive, rather than only through fuel taxes. While policies continue to evolve, the conversation itself shows how transportation costs remain a major topic in the state. Another listener, Sofia, shared that she eventually decided not to bring a car to campus because costs became too high. Instead, she relies on walking, campus transportación, y rides from friends. She said that while having a car feels convenient, living near UCLA makes it possible to manage daily life without one, if students plan carefully. And what these messages show is something important for many young adults moving to Los Angeles. Entreprestación, poco más parte de financiar planning. Students learn to ajusta schedules, share rides, or live closer to the campus when possible. But despite traffic and transportation challenges, living in Los Angeles also offers opportunity. Students experience diverse neighborhoods, events, sports culture, and professional connections that make the city exciting. Informó un inicio de estudiantes, navegando transportación de como es parte de la independencia, manejando tiempo, bujando expenses, y finding balance between conveniences y cost, while still enjoying campus life.